Welcome back to Nick and Steven on Sports, everybody. And for whatever reason, we are back. We have made it. I think this is like our fourth episode, so we're still here. But in all seriousness, in today's show, we're going to be talking about Oregon. We're going to be talking about UCLA, and we're going to be talking about Arizona State. We're going to do a little preview, kind of a light, medium level dive, maybe with a little deep information. Don't get too excited here, but we've been kind of following the format here the last couple of weeks, one team from the top, middle, and bottom tier. So we're going to continue doing that this week. And without further ado, I'm going to kick it down to fellow senior writer, Steven Villardo. And you got any initial thoughts on Oregon or anything else going on right now?
So I think our top tier team, if you will, this week is going to be Oregon. We'll go ahead and talk about the Ducks. They should be really, really good, really exciting. Obviously, the offense is going to be very good. I think we kind of touched on them one time earlier. Some concerns with the offensive line, and I think we'll get to that. But their backfield is just very, very talented. I mean, starts with Bucky Irving, I think Noah Whittingham, Jordan James. I think they combined for over 2,000 yards on the ground last year, like 15 touchdowns in a rotation. They can all catch out of the backfield. A lot of weapons at the disposal of Bo Nix, who I'll get into in a second. Obviously, I think Bucky Irving's probably the best of that bunch of the backs. 400-yard games last year in the last 7 that they played. But even saying that, with as stacked as the running backs are, I think the most dangerous runner on that team is probably still Bo Nix, though. Last year, came from Auburn. I think Auburn fans were probably happy to get rid of him at that time. He needed a change. Couldn't win on the road, couldn't win the big game at Auburn, so to speak. But a fresh change of scenery for Bo Nix and for everybody involved there. I think it's legitimately been an amazing thing. And right now, I think getting into 2023, we can sit here and say Bo Nix is a legitimate Heisman candidate, a legitimate NFL high draft prospect. That's where he's at right now. Last year, he hit 72% of his passes, threw for over almost 4,000, almost 3,600 yards. I think it was 3,593. 29 touchdowns with just 7 interceptions. That was just huge numbers from where he was at Auburn. That's actually huge numbers for anybody, but especially from what he was doing at Auburn, it was quite the difference. Add to that the rushing ability, like we talked about. He was over 500 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns. I think his last 3 games rushing the ball combined, he had -2 yards. So he still put up 510 yards, but and that's with those last 3 games. Basically, he was a non-factor on the ground due to some injuries and everything else that he was kind of banged up there. But so -2 yards over the last 3 games, and still ended up with over 500 on the season from the quarterback spot. That's just highly impressive. And I think you kind of touched on it last time about some big play threats on the at wideout that they kind of didn't have. But the more I look at Troy Franklin, I think he's going to be a legitimate first-round pick. He's got upside to be first-round pick, I think, next April. Had 61 catches last year for almost 900 yards. I think he had 9 or 10. No, it was 9 scores, I think. So, Troy Franklin could be a really big key on the outside and just a threat as a wideout that, something that kind of we haven't seen from Oregon in a little while. At least I don't think we really have seen that kind of bona fide first round wide receiver coming out of Oregon in a couple of years. Or I can't think of actually the last one we had off the top of my head. Terrence Ferguson at tight end. I think you got the numbers of where people are, but I think he's got some all Pac-12 upside for sure at the tight end spot. Could kind of sneak in somewhere on one of those teams. Ended up with mid-30s on grabs. I think he had 5 touchdowns, so a good red zone threat for Bo Nix there. So ready to roll. Also, they've got hit the transfer pool big with wide receivers or pass catchers. A kid from Alabama, Trayshawn Holden. Gary Bryant Jr. from USC comes up from there. So you got a Trojan up there. Obviously, they can make a whole lot of noise at wide receiver. And then Tez Johnson from Troy in Alabama. I think he could be really, really talented. So obviously the offensive line, it's got some patchwork spots, but obviously they lost a lot from arguably the best offensive line in the country last year. But I'm still confident that the line will still perform, and I think they got some players in place that can fill in and do that. And I think we talked about that a couple weeks back too. So yeah, I think offensively they're going to be great. You got anything on the offensive side with Oregon, Nick, before we get into their defense?
Let's see here. Let's take a quick look at the notes before I just ramble off something off the top of my head. I think looking at Oregon, the main thing, like you said, was the offensive line. They're replacing 4 starters, but that can be taken with a grain of salt because they're just going to be able to out physical and out recruit most teams in the Pac-12, most teams in their schedule. So maybe that does play a role, in like maybe more pivotal matchups like Oregon State or something. But it's probably not going to matter in most games. I mean, they could probably be able to out physical most teams, like I want to say 7 or 8 games just alone. So I don't see that being too big of a problem for them. Definitely a little bit of a problem when they're facing the good teams, but not too big. My main concern is really I just want to see him win. Look, I can sit here and go through all my notes and all that, but I just want to see him win. It feels like this offense is always good. And I know Bo Nix hurt himself, but you couldn't beat Washington. You couldn't beat Oregon State in an absolute collapse. That's offense. That's defense. That's absolutely everything. And more beyond the offense, before I go on a full on rant, let me see if there's anything I really want to touch on here. No, I think you took care of it. Troy Franklin's going to be a good threat. They got
along the line. I think it's Josh Connolly, left tackle. I think he's a sophomore. Played some. He filled in a lot of spots on the line last year as a freshman. I think he could develop and be the next really, really good Oregon offensive lineman too. So I think there's potential there. I'll let you get on your rant now, but just touch on the offensive line. I mean, I think while there's definitely holes to fill, I think they've got pieces that can definitely do the job.
No, it's good that you actually kind of caught me there. I was probably going to go way off.
And real quick, also the defensively, and we'll get into their defense because I got some things I want to talk about their defense after your rant, which I think will be the 2. But you talked about their collapses, the 3 losses. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think it was they allowed over 41 points per game in their 3 losses. So I mean, that's just, you can't do that. So last year, but it's all yours, Nick.
Oh no, you're fine. You've actually allowed me probably to collect my thoughts and sound maybe probably more reasonable here. But no, so I mean, before I do go on a bit of a rant, I want to say you're looking at, like you touched on, Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. They ran for combined 1,837 yards in 2022. I don't see those guys are all like elite, but I don't see like one of them being necessarily like just the best player in the conference. I believe I think it's Bucky Irving's first team. It's one of the 2.
It'd be Bucky.
It is Bucky. Okay. So, yeah. I mean, clearly a stud in his own right. So they have the weapons. Again, you touched on Troy Franklin. I'm a believer you got 3 pieces or 3 different options who can all kind of create meaningful plays, big plays that you're going to be all right. So I think they should be all right there. But the main thing for me in Oregon is culture. It's just culture. And this is where I'm hopping ahead. Whether it's the Oregon State collapse last year, which is tough for Ducks fans, maybe not for Beavers fans, but it's tough. It's tough for people in the Pac-12 trying to see a team make it. And then you even go back to like the Justin Herbert year where they lost to ASU, a game they should have won on the road. So it just feels like, or I just want to see Oregon do it, man. That's really just want to say. So I don't want to go too off kilter here. What are your kind of thoughts on the defense?
Well, no, I mean, you bring up a good point there too, and I can even think of the national title game against Auburn that year when they kind of had. I mean, they had it right there, got off to a little lead, and just couldn't finish. And obviously, it was a defensive game, that kind of a struggle for them. Defensively, they lost. Christian Gonzalez obviously to the drafted by the Patriots in the first round. But they still got some players out there in the backfield. Bridges is back. I think he had 3 picks at one corner spot, kind of opposite of Christian Gonzalez, so he can definitely play there. A lot of transfers. Again, they got the Crimson Tide out there in the backfield, defensive backfield, I should say. Kyrie Jackson. Kyrie Jackson. Started off at Alabama. He's out there now. A lot of talent from him. I think he could be very, very good. I think I put together an all Super West team that should be getting published sometime in the next couple of weeks. I've got Jackson up there on one of my top 3 for sure. Nico Reed from Colorado transfers over. He's adequate and can definitely fill in. Evan Williams comes up from Fresno State. Was could have been an all Mountain West performer for sure. Definitely a solid player there. It's all Fresno State lost off of their defense, and that was a pretty big one too. Obviously, Fresno State, another story. They've got some people covered on the defensive side. They're going to be real tough. We'll get to them when we talk about Arizona State a little bit, actually. But so Evan Williams can definitely play at the safety spot, and I would say Tasheen Johnson, another guy from Ole Miss, is another guy that can play. So they got some SEC talent in there. Obviously attracting some talent there. The line was a big problem last year defensively. They couldn't get in the backfield at all. This year, Brandon Dorless he could be an All-American. He could be like a third or fourth team All-American probably on a lot of teams. I had him on the outside of that All-American team. What I put together should come out in a couple weeks. So I would have had him as like a fourth teamer if I went 4 deep, probably. But I definitely had him on the All-Pac West or All-Mountain West team. All Sports Super West team. I'm getting my teams confused there. I did all 3 of them, but yeah, all Super West teams. So they got Dorless on one side.
That's a nice one. I
yeah,
like
Pac West.
That's a nice little
name. That's the future. That's the future conference. Yes. Who knows? And then another SEC guy, Jordan Birch, transferred from South Carolina. So he could just, with those two on the edge, on either end there. They could be putting some fear into some quarterbacks in the Pac-12 this year. With those two guys, Dorless and Birch. They're really good. And then in the middle of the defensive line, they got Taki Tiami, or I think it is, and is it Popo Amave? I don't know if I'm saying Amave right or not, but those guys are just space fillers and can get there at the defensive tackle spot. So I think they'll be all right. The linebackers, they lost some guys. Obviously, you got Noah Sewell's gone. They're gonna have to replace a lot of talent, but they're gonna be there with that. They got Justin Jacobs from Iowa. So Iowa just produces a lot of good linebackers. The Hawkeyes do, and Jacobs, I think, transferring over to Oregon. I think he could be kind of the NFL talent in the middle potentially, and kind of fill in. Pick up where Sewell left off last year for Oregon. So I think the linebacking core is still going to be fine. I think they got enough pieces there. The defensive line should be a lot stronger this year, and they should be getting pressure, then if they get the pressure in, the defensive backs, maybe not quite as strong as last year. I think they still got talent, though. And they definitely have enough talent that if the line's applying pressure, they're going to be able to shut down receivers, too, when they need to. At least hopefully. That's the hope for Oregon fans, I think. And I think if they can do that and kind of turn around on defense, I think they'll be fine. And I think some of the disappointments and heartache might turn the tide a little bit. So we'll see. See if they can get that Georgia East Coast or Georgia West defense going, kind of start developing.
That would just be phenomenal in the Pac-12. You could combine that with Utah obviously always has a good defense, but they could kind of establish themselves with a defensive identity. That would just be huge, particularly obviously with the LA schools leaving next year. Washington's kind of fallen a little bit. Kalen DeBoer is a phenomenal coach, but he's not as defensive oriented as Chris Peterson. Yeah. So Oregon could really be that team in the Pac-12.
That's true. And schedule-wise for them, inside the conference, they travel to Washington, they travel to Utah, they got USC at home, and they have got Oregon State at home. So, kind of those are their big 4. They don't play UCLA, so those are kind of the 4, and they're split 2 and 2. 2 at home, 2 on the road. So that's sets up pretty good if they can get them, especially if they get those 2 on the road, or at least one of them. Maybe knock off Utah or Washington and, get one of those wins. That's a loss for kind of the biggest rival you're going to be going up against as far as getting to the Pac-12 championship. So you got, USC, Utah, Washington, Oregon kind of all battling it out in there, along with Oregon State, kind of, I think we touched on last week as an outsider. So, steal one of those on the road, get the 2 at home, and you're 3-1 against those 4 teams and sitting in a good spot to play for the title.
No doubt. Oregon's obviously going to always be there talent-wise. I don't know if I'm quite as high on them as you are, but Oregon's a brand in our conference, and they could easily. They have the talent. They're one of the 4 or 5 teams, like you said. A couple other defensive players. If you said them already, I just want to throw out a couple names. You got Casey Rogers and Jeffrey Bassa. A couple of names to kind of consider.
A couple linebackers as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and you touched on Dorless, which is obviously. And then one kind of final note, Camden Lewis could actually prove like a nice weapon. He's their kicker. And I think he could be maybe a little bit more desirable in terms of clutchness, but he could become the record holder in both points and field goals this year. That was kind of a direct quote from Athlon. Just want to give him their credit on that one. But so I mean, he could kind of prove vital in some close games here. So kind of looking at the final overview of Oregon, because we did spend a good amount of time on them. You got kind of like a final win prediction. Is it too early? Where do you think they land in the conference, or whatever you feel comfortable?
I'm not sure. I think. Well, I mean, if we go through their conference games, I think they'll start off 2-0 in the conference play with Colorado, Stanford. Then they got Washington. Washington after a bye at Washington, they'll be hungry. I don't know. I'll give the Ducks a win there. Washington State a win. They'll drop to Utah. I think they'll lose 2 games in conference. So whatever that make them, 7-2 in conference, and non-conference. I think they should go 3-0. They got Texas Tech will be a tough matchup on the road. Portland State and Hawaii should be wins. So I'll give them I'll give them 10-2 regular season.
I love that you just made me do math. I was like trying to add. I was like, you said 3-0 plus 7-2. Okay, 10-2. I like it. That's probably the only math I can do, and that's not a joke. Me and math are probably not best friends. But so yeah, you said 10-2. I think I like that actually. I'd love to disagree, but 10-2 sounds pretty reasonable to me. That's kind of giving them a little leeway for one of those top tier USC Washington type games.
Yeah, and with that, I'm thinking they drop to USC at home and pick up one of the 2 against Washington or Utah on the road. That's where I'm at.
Perfect. And then just to sum up Oregon, kind of the first teamers, and this is Athlon's first team. I know PFF just released their own list, but that's a little bit different to me. Athlon's a little bit more traditional. So at running back, it is Bucky Irving's a first teamer. Defense line, Brandon Dorless, and second teamers are Troy Franklin, wideout, defensive line, Jordan Birch, and kicker Camden Lewis. And just normally we wouldn't throw in a third teamers, but it is notable to say that Bo Nix was a third team, and they have 15 total selections from all the Pac-12 teams, and that leaves them second in the conference to USC. So hopping now into our middle tier team might not be quite as deep of a dive because obviously just a little bit lower expectations. But you got any initial thoughts on UCLA this year?
Well, when I start looking at UCLA, I'm up and down on them because I like to think they're going to be really good for a minute, and then I kind of look at them and I'm not as high on them. But so quarterback wise, obviously you lose DTR, and that's just, he was everything for UCLA for the past 4 years and stepped in and was amazing. But as you kind of dig deeper into it, obviously Dante Moore, huge recruit out of Detroit, first true freshman guy. I think he's going to be a superstar. A lot of hype for him. I think he can kind of take the offense kind of a step further. Extremely accurate quarterback. Skills are all there for him. Is he a lock to start yet though? That's the thing. I think he probably will start, but obviously you got Ethan Gerber's there too, who's been in the system for a few years. I think the guy who really could kind of start would be, at least start at the start of the year before maybe Dante Moore takes over, would be Colin Schilly from Kent State, because he's got that Chip Kelly kind of offensive skill out of his quarterback. He's an athlete. It'd be a great situation to kind of jump in, kind of obviously not quite like DTR as far as good, but kind of fitting that same style, at least at the start of the year. Athletic, can make a lot of plays running the ball as well as throwing, a good accurate thrower. But I think ultimately Dante Moore is going to be the quarterback for sure. Cam Brown is a decent threat deep. Wide receivers, I'm not real sure sold on their wideouts yet, but you got J. Michael Sturden from Cal, transferred down there. That's a huge get. Kyle Ford from USC. They got tight end from Oregon, Matavio. Those guys could all play key roles as transfers coming in. Another tights, Hudson, is it Habermill? He's another tight end that could get some action. I think he had like 50 grabs last year, along with the other guy, Atiamala, maybe. Is that his name? Titus was his first name. But anyway, so I think they can definitely be good. Logan Loy is another wide out. So, I think they got enough players there. Running back, I think they're going to be really good because Carson Steele from Ball State, he was a 1,000-yarder last year. he was a fourth team All-American for Ball State. I mean, he's a physical back. I think he ended up with like over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns for the Cardinals last year. Obviously, the MAC is a totally different level than the Pac-12 will be talent-wise, but definitely a very capable running back that should be able to fill in and do great in the system that UCLA's got. I think they'll be fine. Defensively, they were kind of let down last year. They last 7 games, I think they allowed 32 points in 5 of them and lost 4 of them. But I think this year it could actually be kind of a little bit of a strength for them. I mean, it could kind of help them out. They got, and I might be saying a lot of these names wrong. The Polynesian names are not my forte for sure, but
can I say sorry for interrupting you? But
no, go for
it. In this day and age, man, like this may be a little different, especially living up here in Seattle. But I think we all probably try and do our best on names. I mean, sometimes things happen, and like I can guarantee if I went back to like my grandma's born in Russia, I can guarantee if I went to Russia or my grandpa's born in Poland, I could probably not pronounce like half the names in the village. So it just want
just let them roll. Just let them go. Yeah, exactly. Anything on the UCLA offense from you though, Nick? Before I get into the D.
I think actually it's kind of slightly too late to touch on. There's some you said, but I think I'll just the big thing is always, how they replace DTR and Charbonnet. I guess the one thing I will add, I'm not really adding. I heard this in a podcast. For those of you guys who listen to the podcast of Champions, I like other podcasts too. We're a little different. It's okay, guys. I enjoy their show, their content. But David Woods, he's a UCLA writer, and he's like, I feel he's probably more negative in regards to UCLA and the outlook of their program than others. And he was really hyped on Carson Steele. So having him being hyped on Carson Steele tells me that he's probably going to be pretty good. And he also raised another valuable point on how if you plug, and he's not a big fan of Chip Kelly, but if you put most running backs into Chip Kelly's offense, they're going to succeed. He's really just most levels, he's done a really good job of designing run offense. So that's the one thing I'd take away, and that's coming directly from a UCLA writer. So.
Yeah, I think that's on point too. I think Carson Steele's the real deal for sure, for many reasons. On the defensive side, though, yeah, I mean, so they've got some talent there. Laiatu Latu, I've got him on my 3rd team All-American for the Super West All-American thing that I've got it that'll come out later. 1st team Pac-12 in my mind there on the end, kind of an edge / linebacker kind of player. The guys, he had 10.5 sacks last year, 12.5 tackles for loss. He created pressure on 52 plays last year for UCLA. So I mean, he'll do even better this year. You got Gabriel Murphy on the other side, 13.5 sacks at North Texas before working his way to the end of the rotation at UCLA last year. Once he got in there, he was able to create some havoc too. So I think a full year with Murphy in there along with Latu gives them 2 good edge rushers, penetration on the outside. Inside, they've got Jay Toya. He's just huge, 325 at the nose tackle. He'll take up space. Darius Masau on the linebacker is pretty good. I mean, he's got a lot of talent too. He'll be right in the middle of the linebacker. He can drop down into coverage. He can create some pressure. He can stop the run. Had 29.5 tackles for loss in his 3 years, 12.5 sacks for him. So he's another guy that he should be really good in the middle for that defense. And then Oladipo, I think it is, had 91 tackles at Cal last year. He's now in there as a linebacker for him. John Vons, I think it is. He and who was the other one? Bryant Strother. It's Bryant Strother Cole, something that those two combined for like almost 80 stops to combined on the outside linebacker spot. So they should be good. The DBs, you got some, Devin Kirkwood, I think could be really good. I liked him a lot last year too. Jalen Davis, another guy that could get in there. I don't know, Jordan Anderson, I think he'll be at one of the safeties. He could do pretty well. I think for his career, he's got like 5 interceptions, 20 passes defended. So not a lot of experience though in the back half of the secondary. So we'll see how they adjust there. Last year they allowed 39.4% on third downs, which I think was like 80th in the nation, 78th in the nation. So they got to get better getting people off the field on third down. But obviously, last 7 games, whatever, when they gave up 32 and 5 of them and lost, I mean, there were a lot of problems on the defensive side of the ball that they just couldn't stop. And they really couldn't stop the pass. I mean, and that killed them in the USC game. I mean, obviously, Caleb Williams is the best in the country, but I mean, they're driving down there. I think there was the game before that, a week or two before it. I can't remember who it was, but there were a lot of late drives in the third and fourth quarter. Just couldn't get teams off the field when they were throwing the ball against them.
No doubt, yeah. I mean, and just looking at their defense, I think you did a good job naming all those players, man. I was just like, my knowledge is probably a little lighter than that. The only thing I really got to add here is, I mean, it was rough last year, and again, this is a stat coming from Athlon. They had a really unique defense. So listen to the stat carefully. They didn't allow one gain of 50 yards or more last season, but they also ranked 110th nationally in regards to giving up plays more than 10 yards. So it's like they couldn't stop the intermediate stuff, but they were able to stop basically the deep plays. That's been statistic of Athlon. So I think that's just kind of something interesting to note. And then they also have a new defensive coordinator in D'Anton Lynn. He was previously with the Baltimore Ravens, and so he'll kind of be first time, kind of just getting into the thick of things here. So, man, I was trying to think of an original cliche, but yeah, just first time stepping into it here. So, I think that pretty much.
If we want to go win wise for them, they got Coastal Carolina and then at San Diego State, North Carolina Central for the non-conference. I think they can win all 3 of those. At San Diego State could be tough, but I'll give them 3-0 there. Then they open at Utah, and I think that's going to be a loss in Pac-12. Bye week, and then Washington State at home. Cougars coming off a bye too. I'll give UCLA that one. And they got at OSU, at Stanford. Give them a win there. Colorado a win. At Arizona could be rough. USC on the road. Cal at home. So I think that I could see them winning 4, maybe 4 conference games and 3 non-conference. So I'll give them a 7-win season. Kind of, if my math was quick there. I don't know if that was right or not, but yeah. Kind of middling for sure. Definitely a middling team. They'll have to beat the teams they should beat.
No, it's I've never actually, the way you're doing it probably makes more sense, but I've never heard it do it that way. It's cool. The little non-conference conference, and like I said, it's makes my math brain work a little bit here. So but again, rounding out kind of the UCLA, looking at their first teamers, they got linebacker Leatu Latu. Second teamers is running back Carson Steele, linebacker Darius Muasau. I probably just said that one wrong. You know how it is. And I did throw on one notable third teamer here, center Duke Clemens. I just always think it's cool. I think a center plays a pretty crucial role in the line. So they had a total of 9 selections, which was essentially middle of the conference. And yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that for UCLA. Hopping over to ASU, the whole team is transfers. I mean, is there anything you can say about their whole team is transfers?
It's amazing, like, because I mean, this team the program was I mean, obviously it's ASU. They've had a lot of really good teams, but I mean, 9 bowls in the last 11 years, and one of the 2 years was 2020. Was one of, I mean, so you kind of throw out the COVID year. So, I mean, you could almost say, and I think they were like 2-0 that year, and then I think they ended up 2-2 or something, but it was the COVID year anyway. So you could almost say like 10 out of 11 years they're playing in bowl games. And then the bottom just drops out. I mean, it was obviously they had the recruiting issue that got, like half of the staff, I think, was it 5 coaches fired before last year. Herm hung on, and then, the debacle against Eastern Michigan, and he was out the door after that. And then it fell out though. So, I mean, good news, Emory Jones has transferred to Cincinnati. So you lost your starter, but then again, I mean, I don't know how big a loss that was for ASU. So they got Drew Pine now. And who's the recruit they had? Jaden Rashada. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to throw Rashada out to the Wolves yet right away with this team, because, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of talent. Let him kind of learn. And Drew Pine could be a very good quarterback. And this is another team that I've kind of like, the more I dug into them this week, the kind of like I mean, I still don't see a lot of wins, but I'm more confident of ASU today than I was, say, last Thursday, kind of before we started looking at them. I'm still not real confident, but they got some good wide receivers. Elijah Badger, he led the team last year with 70 catches, 856 yards. So I mean, he's I think he had 7 scores. They got a big tight end, 6'4", like 270-ish, 265-ish, and Jalen Conyers. So I mean, he's got some Pac-12 upside potentially. I think he had like 5 touchdowns, a big red zone target, only like 32 catches. So I mean, you're getting a lot of touchdowns off of his stuff. Xavier Gallery transfers from FCS Idaho State. He could be okay. They got a kid from Texas, Troy O'Mary, Naquan Stovall from Nevada. They've got a couple guys that can kind of build up an attack at least. Offensive line, they got, I mean, obviously we're talking about transfers all over the place, but Aaron Frost, Ben Coleman from Cal is a decent player. They got some Mountain West guys that all could be starting there. Obviously a little, not exactly where you want to be, but who knows? I mean, I think Cameron Scatabo will be the starter at running back, perhaps. I think he went for 1,400 yards with Sacramento State last year. So, I mean, there's some people that potentially could do something. I got an Oklahoma transfer on defense and Clayton Smith who can come in and probably get some pressure perhaps on the defensive side. But they got to get takeaways. I mean, last year they just couldn't get teams off the field at all, and that was a problem. Interesting stat with them, and then I don't have a whole lot more on ASU because they are a lot of transfers. We can kind of go through the things, but I'll let you get to it. But the interesting stat I've got is last year, fumbles. Opponents had 15 fumbles. One of them lost. So opponents recovered 14. Arizona State as a team, 10 fumbles, five fumbles lost. So yeah. So ASU lost 5 fumbles and they only put the ball on the ground 10 times. Opponents put the ball on the ground 15 times and ASU only came away with it once. So I don't know if that's just an indictment on how bad they were or if it's just how bad of luck they also had, because a lot of that's just got to be the way that literally the ball bounces. I mean, yeah.
So okay, see, when you said you had an interesting stat, I was a little curious. That was funny. You said they had 15 fumbles in wait.
Opponents fumbled the ball 15 times, and Arizona State only recovered one of those opponents 15 times.
That's so bad.
Yeah.
That's so bad.
Yeah.
It can't even. And I was trying so hard at the beginning. You probably saw me grinning a little bit. I was doing I think it's like a different show last year, and I think I was probably a little too hard on ASU, and I was trying to I was trying to be nice, and then you just hit me with that stat. That was funny, man. Is there anything I can do to redeem ASU? I'm gonna go through all my notes and find one thing good. Actually, no, I think you have a better feel. Obviously, he's a little bit more in your area, Drew Pine. But I do think it is important to note that, I mean, he was 8-2 at Notre Dame as a starter, and that's a pressure-filled job. I don't care if Notre Dame's having a down year, up year, whatever. Notre Dame is a prestigious program, and they're boosters, and everyone expects success. So whether he lived up to their expectations, that's irrelevant here. 8-2 at a school like Notre Dame, that says something. And Trenton Bourguet did do a good job as a fill-in last year. I thought he's actually a lot better than Emory Jones. Like you basically said, you said not much of a loss, but I do think Trenton Bourguet's decent. Other dude, Rashad Ivan, probably just a bit too young. I'm sure he's a lot of potential. You touched on Conyers and Badgers. Yeah, I mean, really not. It just gets worse. I mean, the more I go through their notes, I mean, how are they going to replace Zadavion Valladay, who is an absolute menace? I mean, he was one of the most elite running backs in the Pac-12 last year. But you're not gonna be able to replace that. I know that they got Scatbo, but Valladay was a legit player. So that's a little bit rough. Let's not even talk about the offensive line because that's essentially just 2 transfers. I mean, it's really tough. I'm really trying to find just like one really good thing. Oh yeah, so you touched on kind of the transfers from Oklahoma and Texas, Clayton Smith and Prince Dorba. They returned
from Michigan State too. So
yeah,
Deshaun Mallory from Michigan State. Sorry. He's another good one on the line. So they got some defensive line players that are good.
Yeah, so there's enough. And again, I mean, bottom line is all these things we're saying here, 33 transfers. We can sit here and I can't speak for Steven. I could sit here and make up what this means on paper. No one really knows. I guess looking at their schedule, they do 8 home games. So that could be the one maybe Xavier to scrap out 4 or 5 wins. I know some people on the high end of things would even say that they could sneak into a bowl. I'd probably disagree with that myself.
So if we look at that schedule, so their bye week is dropped dead in the middle, October 14th. 6 games before, 6 games after. The 6 games before, they got Southern Utah, Oklahoma State, Fresno State at home, USC at home, at Cal, and Colorado. So, you could see, okay, they lose to USC at home. They probably lose to Oklahoma State. I mean, I think they'll probably lose to Fresno State too, to be honest with you. But let's just say they can knock off Fresno State, Southern Utah, steal the win at Berkeley, beat Colorado. They're going into that bye week 4-2. I mean, that's best case scenario. But you go into that bye week 4-2, and that's something special. And then obviously the last 6 games, they're at Washington, they got Washington State, at Utah, at UCLA, Oregon, Arizona. So you might be lucky to get 2 wins there. But you walk into that bye week 4-2, and you never know what happens in the second half of the season. Now, conversely, let's say they drop that game to Fresno State, they drop the game at Cal. Now you're walking into that bye, 2-4, maybe 1-5, and then the bottom drops out, and they might not win another game then. So that's kind of where it goes there.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, yeah, and that, like you said, I mean, if they're starting off 4-2, college football is more, I'd say, probably one of the most momentum-ridden sports. I mean, you could throw college basketball in there because just the crowds, the young kids just being really influenced by them. So they got up to 4-2, new coach, young head coach. Maybe they get some energy, some juice, and do a sneak into bowl. For me, I still standing at that 4 to 8 wins, 4 to 5 wins, something like that. I'm probably thinking more along 5. You want to pick up? You want to throw out some wins before I kind of read out the third teamers?
I'll go with a 4-win season for him. I'll give him a win at Southern Utah. A win against no, I'm going to give him 3 wins. Southern Utah, Colorado, and I'll give him I'll have him steal a road game somewhere. Steal one up. Steal one more.
Okay, perfect. And wow, this is just I really hope my cousin went to ASU, so I hope that it does get better. And I really like I love that they've obviously there's probably some drawbacks, but I like that they have a very heavily community type feel at that school. So they have a fun time. So I think that's a cool element. I do want to throw some good things for ASU, but this year, just no first teamers, no second teamers. It's just what it is. So we did just kind of slide down to the notable third teamers, and it was wide receiver Elijah Badger, tight end Jalen Connors, and actually you probably touched on him. I know I forgot to. Cornerback Ro Torrance. He could actually be a pretty solid player for ASU. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You got anything else you want to add? I mean, we are waiting on a tornado warning. Should we just wait it out to see?
I think it is expired now. So yeah, I mean, we had some. Yeah, we had the tornado warning earlier. We had some hail. We all had all kinds of good stuff here in Southern Indiana tonight. So good weather-wise. But I think we're good now. I think it's all clear.
All right, man. Well, we made it somehow. I literally have nothing. Like, I've been staring at this camera for what are we at now? 38 minutes. I have nothing probably that could even be logical to say other than I mean, it should be fun to watch this year. Pretty simple. It's basic, but the Pac-12 is pretty good this year. Whether it's Oregon, obviously should be really good. UCLA could be really good, and ASU does have the potential to sneak out 6 wins. So yeah, you got anything else?
Nope, we're good.
All right, well then, adios, and thank you guys for tuning in.